At the start of every week, on Tuesdays, I go through and I rank the top 12 defense rankings for fantasy football for the particular week that's upcoming. And over the past several weeks, I've been getting a lot more questions lately about defenses that are outside of the top 12 that I actually don't think are bad options. And I have a lot of questions about, can I play this defense? So we're doing it for the second week in a row now. We're going through every matchup of week 10 fantasy football to find the must start and sit defenses for this particular week of fantasy football. And guys, we are almost at 7,500 subscribers on Football Fanalysts Network, and I need your help to get there because as soon as I get there, I will be giving away tons of these FFN hats. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and start getting into these matchups. So the first matchup here, it's a Germany matchup overseas. Will be played on Sunday morning early, so make sure your lineup is set because we've got the Colts and the Patriots in this matchup right here. Now, I said it on my top 12 defense ranking this week. I think the Colts defense is a very, very good play. You look back to what they did last week, they had 2 defensive touchdowns for almost 30 points in fantasy football for a defense, and that was against the Carolina Panthers. Now, obviously, we saw what Carolina did on Thursday night versus the Bears. They look horrendous. Well, lo and behold, the Patriots look no better. The Patriots offense is the worst I've seen it in a long, long time. And the reality is they can't put up points against anybody. And they're also just as prone to turnovers as Carolina is as well. Now, I'm not going to come out here and predict that Indianapolis is going to get 2 more defensive touchdowns this week. I'm not saying that. But there's definitely a possibility that they could get another pick or 2 and a couple more turnovers. The Indianapolis Colts, to me, taking on the Patriots offense, this is a great start here. Patriots are falling apart. And that leads me to the reason why I would never play the New England Patriots defense. I think they're never startable. This is a team that last week had a decent chance to have a good defensive performance against Washington, and they couldn't take advantage of it. New England's defense is simply just not very good. So they're falling apart. They're in Germany. It's just not going to happen this week. Browns at Ravens is the next matchup here. And in the defense ranking video this week, I said the Ravens are a pretty good started defense. Now, the Ravens have been excellent defensively. They're the number 2 defense in fantasy football as of right now. Now, the other part of this is that the Ravens have taken on some pretty stout opponents at beating them down. They took on the Detroit Lions and absolutely just embarrassed them. They just embarrassed the Seattle Seahawks. And those are pretty good offenses. More talented than the Browns. Now, I have said in several videos this week, I actually think this is going to be a more competitive matchup than people think, simply because of the fact that this is a divisional matchup. And if you look at the line for this game, it's actually got the lowest over-under of the entire week. Now, the Ravens are favored by 6 points in this game. But I do think the Ravens will have a tougher matchup, but nonetheless, the Ravens defense is playing downhill football right now. They're mean, they're physical, they're punching you in the mouth, turnovers, sacks. You got to play the Ravens defense, in my opinion, moving forward, unless something drastic changes. Browns defense, I do think that in a pinch, you could play the Browns defense. And really the reason why I do think this is because you look at the Browns defense this year, they've also been tremendous defensively in fantasy football. Now, they haven't taken on a Ravens-level offense in several weeks. So I do think that there's a lot of, problems that could arise in this particular week. But I also think that the Browns defense has been so dominant with Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward. They've got a great defense in Cleveland right now. And the fact that it is a divisional matchup, I do think could give Cleveland an advantage. With that said, I'm not going out of my way to play Cleveland. They're in the upper tier of any pinch defenses. I would not recommend it if you've got a defense like the Indianapolis Colts that we just went over. Packers at Steelers here. I said to start the Steelers defense this week in my top 12 defense rankings. I think the Steelers defense is a very good start. To be honest with you, I say this every week. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense is just a defense that always can be played just based on turnovers alone. They get at least 1 or 2 turnovers per game. That's just it. You can mark it down, basically. Pittsburgh's defense, on the other hand, not very good at stopping you from getting yardage. They're actually 7th worst in rushing defense, and they're not very good in passing defense either. This defense gives up yardage. They don't give up a lot of points, and they also take the ball away, and they get after your quarterback. I think that's what's going to happen. I think Jordan Love's going to struggle in this game in Pittsburgh against a tough pass rush. And Green Bay has not been able to find any kind of offensive rhythm. None at all. So I do think that the Steelers defense is a very good start, while also acknowledging I think you could play Green Bay's defense at a pinch. I really do. You look at Green Bay's defense, and ordinarily, I would not say yes to this one. But based on what they did with the Rams last week, there's hope. There's hope. And that's really what you can count on here, because they're taking on an offense that's maybe not just as bad with Brett Rippon. You know, last week when they had to play Brett Rippon, but the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is one of the worst in the NFL. So if the Packers defense could pick up some of that momentum they got last week against the Rams, they could be in line for a decent fantasy week. But I would say that this is a pretty desperate play, to be honest with you. Packers defense has not had much upside fantasy football from what we've seen this season. 49ers and Jaguars here. Jaguars, I did say, they're a startable option this week. I think the Jaguars defense is very good. And let me break this down. The reason why I think that you can play the Jags defense is because I think that they're a very good defense. And numbers back it up. They're getting after your quarterback. They're getting turnovers, specifically interceptions. Their secondary is a bunch of ball hawks. That's what Jacksonville's secondary is. Now, what's San Francisco's problem been before the bye week? Brock Purdy is now starting to show a little bit of cracks. He's been turning the ball over more, throwing more interceptions. That plays into Jacksonville's hands. Now, both of these teams are coming off a bye week. So I do think that there is a chance that both of these teams come out and bring their best. And in fact, I've said it in several videos this week. I think this is a kitchen sink type of game for San Francisco this week. I really do. But the reality here is that Jacksonville's defense has done very, very well this season. And as opposed to the 49ers defense, they have vastly underperformed this year in fantasy. You look at what they did last year, that was a different defense, because here's the reason. They had D'Amico Ryans as defensive coordinator last year. He's now in Houston. Their current defensive coordinator is not working very well. Their pass defense is weak, and Nick Bosa and that defensive line, they haven't been very strong. I think they're going to be better now with Chase Young, but we haven't seen it yet, and they're taking on a very tough test here against the Jags. I think you could do it in a pinch because they're both coming off a bye week, and San Francisco's well coached and a good team, talented, but I would not say that they're as startable as Jacksonville's defense is. Saints and Vikings this week. Saints defense, I think, is a very good play this week. I think it's going to end up being a much better play than a lot of people think. And here's the thing. I've said this over the week as well. I said that when you look at what Josh Dobbs did in week 9, everybody is impressed with it. You won't find, I have not found anybody that was like, oh, big deal. Like, everybody said the same thing, which is that this guy got off a plane 48 to 72 hours before the game. He wasn't even slotted to start originally, but their backup quarterback got a concussion. So he had to come in and start for the Minnesota Vikings, and he won the freaking game. Like, that's impressive to do. Nobody's discounting that. What I have said this week is that that wasn't the same test he's getting this week. Last week he played Atlanta's defense, which, by the way, they're not a good defense at all. So he was able to take advantage and exploit their weaknesses because he's a very smart player. Now, the thing here with the Saints defense, the Saints defense is a good defense. They're good at stopping the run. They're good. They've got a good secondary. The Saints defense is a much tougher test to Josh Dobbs than Atlanta is. So I think the Saints defense is a really good play this week. I think they'll end up being a better play than you think. And then I was really close to considering the Vikings in a pinch option. I prefer not to. I went pretty heavily in on them in week 9, and I got embarrassed a little bit. That was a bad call. You know what I mean? They did not do very well. I do think they're a good defense still. Brian Flores has done a very good job this year, but I don't think that they're going to be startable against the Saints offense that has underperformed. But they have plenty of talent, and they can get you down there, and they're always very yardage happy every single week. They're just not always efficient in capitalizing on their attempts. The Texans and Bengals here. Now, the Bengals defense I do have as a startable option this week. I think you can start the Bengals defense. Now, a lot of things have evolved since the defense ranking video. On the Texans side of the ball, Nico Collins is out. So they're without Nico Collins, and they're also without Damian Pierce the second week in a row. That doesn't matter as much because either way, the Texans have not been able to establish any kind of run game any week this year. They can't get a run game going. So I don't worry about the Damian Pierce thing. I do worry about the Nico Collins thing because when you look at what Nico Collins and Tank Dell have done together, both of them have good weeks on different weeks particularly. Now, Nico Collins is viewed as the wide receiver 1-2 defenses. And so Tank Dell is open a lot as a result of, more often than not, coverage being rolled towards Nico Collins. I wonder if there's going to be an issue with Tank Dell that a lot of people may not think is an issue. I think the Bengals defense, when you look at them, they've been fantastic this year. Their ball hawking secondary, very similar to Jacksonville's actually. But the difference is they get after your quarterback more than Jacksonville does. Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard on the other side, but the Bengals got a good defense, man. So I think they're going to get after the Texans. I think it's going to be a very tough test for Houston. And honestly, I really did consider putting the Texans defense in the in a pinch section. And the only reason for it is because the Bengals have lots of injuries this week. T. Higgins is already out, and Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon, they're actually banged up. I think Joe Mixon, he's fine, but Jamar Chase is coming in questionable. So this offense specifically is banged up. But what we saw from the Texans defense last week, I can't stomach to put them back in a startable position because they couldn't even hold Tampa Bay to under 30 points in this game. I don't think they will do it against the Bengals. And Joe Burrow, who's on fire right now. Titans and Buccaneers. I don't think either of them are must-start defenses. I really don't. I think when you look at the Titans defense, they have not had good weeks really at all this season. They're just not getting after your quarterback. What they do well is they stop the run, but that doesn't stop them from giving up a lot of yards and a lot of points through the air. And that's exactly what the Titans defense problem is. Now, that's the reason that I think you can play the Titans defense in a pinch. I think you could do that because Tampa Bay is getting really worse by the week. Now, Tampa Bay, like I said, they did just put up 30 plus on the Houston Texans. I don't know if they could do that 2 weeks in a row. I don't think that Baker Mayfield can do that 2 weeks in a row. Now, like I said, I'm not telling you to play the Titans defense. I'm just saying that if you don't have a lot of better options, if you don't have the Bengals defense, if you don't have the Colts defense, I think you could play the Titans defense. Buccaneers, I don't think you could play. The Buccaneers defense has just gone downhill. That's just the reality here. They've gone downhill. They can't stop anybody right now. And the way that Will Levis and the Titans are playing now that he's in there, I think the Buccaneers are going to struggle defensively. Lions and Chargers. Nobody's a must start because this is one of the best matchups of the week. This is a top tier matchup right here. Both of these teams have good offenses that are very, very efficient. Lions are running the ball. Chargers have Justin Herbert, and they don't turn the ball over very much. So I can't put either of them in must start. The only one I think you can play is the Chargers defense. The only reason that they're here in a pinch section is a lot of it's based on last week, but they did. They did well last week, and that was better than they'd done all year. Now, the good thing about last week, they played the Jets. We have to keep that in mind. They played the Jets offense. The Lions offense is not the Jets offense. So they're a low tier in a pinch type of defense you could play, but they do have the talent. There's no question. Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, they've got Derwin James. They've got plenty of talent on this defense, which might, in a lot of ways, in a lot of weeks moving forward, leave them in the pinch territory. I can't say the same about the Lions defense, though, because the reality is the Chargers can score points on you, and they don't give away the ball. So the Lions defense, I don't think is going to have many opportunities this week to have a good fantasy week. Falcons and Cardinals here, next matchup. Neither of them's a must start. And one of the most popular defenses I've been asked about really several weeks in a row now is Atlanta's defense. I've gotten tons of questions about, can I play Atlanta's defense this week? Can I play them this week? How about next week? And I understand the reasons why. They've had several good matchups in a row, and every single one of them, for the exception of last week, they haven't done anything good. Now, last week, they were a decent defense to play in fantasy football terms. And I do think there's a chance they could have a decent game again, and that's why they're here in the in-a-pinch territory. I don't think it's going to be as bad as Arizona has been, though, because now they've got Kyler Murray back. So that's going to change the game here for Arizona. I don't like Arizona's defense either. Arizona's defense has not had a single good week in fantasy football this year. Overall, I wouldn't go out of my way to play either of these defenses, but I do think that in Arizona this week, a team that is in a tailspin, how right can Kyler Murray right this ship? How much can he really do? I can understand that argument and wanting to play Atlanta's defense as a result. Giants at Cowboys here. Cowboys is must start. I said it in the Week 10 defense ranking video. They were number one. You play the Cowboys defense with full confidence. Games in Dallas. They're coming off a really close loss to another divisional opponent. They're pissed. The Giants are down to a Sopranos character. It's just not good for the New York Giants. They're having a terrible season. So the Cowboys defense is a no-brainer, and it's also a no-brainer to not play the Giants defense. In a week where they could have capitalized versus Las Vegas last week, they got embarrassed. So the Giants defense is a no-go. Commanders at Seahawks here. You could play the Seahawks defense with confidence. I intend to roll out the Seahawks defense with confidence. The Seahawks defense, they got embarrassed last week. But the reality is, before the embarrassment, they were getting after your quarterback. They were getting interceptions. They were getting forced fumbles. The Seahawks defense is aggressive. They're young. They're athletic. And they're fast. They're going to be fine this week. At home versus the Washington Commanders, who have looked okay offensively the past several weeks. I think this is a get-right game for Seattle. And I love a lot of Seattle options, period. But I especially like their defense this week. And I do not like the Commanders' defense ever since they got rid of Chase Young and Montez Sweat. They had an opportunity to have a fantastic defensive performance last week against the Patriots, and they did not capitalize in the slightest. Do not play the Commanders' defense. Jets and Raiders here. I think they're both playable, honestly. And it feels weird to have two defenses in the same matchup, in the same category in the must start. I think they're both good options. Jets defense is obviously elite. They were elite for basically the whole first half against the Chargers on Monday Night Football in Week 9. They were elite. Their problem is that their offense can't get it going, and so they have issues. Well, the difference here between last week and this week, the Jets' only hope is running the ball with Breece Hall and occasionally hitting on some big plays to Garrett Wilson. Well, the Chargers defense, they've got a top 5 run defense. The Raiders defense, they're dead last at stopping the run. So the Jets, I think, can get it going offensively, and that will change the trajectory for the Jets defense this week. And the Raiders defense, I think they're just as playable because the Jets offense sucks. They suck. They have good pieces, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, but they can't get anything going consistently. That's their reality right here. So I think that the Raiders defense could absolutely be played. Even though I think Breece Hall can and will exploit this matchup, I don't think that's going to cover everything. The Jets offensive line sucks, and Max Crosby is on fire this year. Dude looks like an animal. I think they're both playable defenses this week. And then the last matchup of the week, Broncos at Bills on Monday night. I've been saying it all week. I think the Bills defense is a great start. I think they're a fantastic start this week. Back at home, they're coming off a really embarrassing stretch. They want to right the ship right now. I think the Bills defense is going to get it right. And really, they haven't been bad from a fantasy football perspective because they can get your quarterback and they can also get turnovers. What's the Denver offense weakness? They can score points. I'm not denying the fact that they can score points, but Denver's offense has a bad offensive line. That's not a good matchup here for a Bills pass rush that's very good this year. I think the Bills defense, great play this week, and I would not play Denver's defense. While I will acknowledge, I did consider putting them in a pinch because what they did in Week 8 versus the Chiefs offense. They were the number 1 defense in Week 8 fantasy football. They were excellent. And I was on record saying I think that's a fluke game. I don't think we're going to see that again from the Broncos defense. But I will say I will be watching this very closely to see what Denver's defense looks like, because if they can repeat this performance again versus the Bills off a bye week, I think they could be an interesting defensive play moving forward. And especially with the Bills as bad as they've been offensively lately, I considered it, but I elected not to put them in a pinch territory. So let me know what questions you need answered before Week 10 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 12 defenses and where they ranked for Week 10 fantasy football, click on this video right here.